So, a couple years ago when I first came to this location, I prepped this tree here, this big black cherry tree, and I'm up there probably 27 feet to my feet, and it's got all this red brush, and the deer were actually skirting the outside of that red brush. And I like this tree because it's big diameter. So going from the bedding over here and along the river over there where they bed, when they come around this corner here where the field we just walked through, and they cut this corner. But what they were doing is they were cutting the outside edge of this red brush as opposed to going through it because it was so dense. So what I've done is I've made some lanes through these briar patches, if you will, just these heavy briars, so deer can cut this corner on these lanes that are now runways through these briars, and they're within my shooting distance. So there actually was a scrape here last year, primary scrape area. They were cutting through this corner. Deer coming from out in that field, coming down through here, they're cutting through this briars now. Deer coming from this bedding over here are cutting these briars when they want to go back over to that bedding area during pre-rut and rut to scent check for does. So this is just a nice little inside corner. So you got open timber here, you got swamp here, you got a crop field over there, you got swamp here, a river over there that has bedding on both sides, and it's easy for the deer to cross the river and come back over here. And this up here is just a little CRP field. So we're right on the corner of this where it's just a perfect transition zone during the pre-rut and rut. It's the only time I hunt this spot, pre-rut and rut, basically October 25th through November 10th. When you do this kind of stuff in the spring, what odor you leave here, you know, that's irrelevant. If you make a visual change, it's irrelevant because we're doing this basically months and months before deer season. You go out pre-season and do something like this, you're leaving a lot of human odor because you're going to be perspiring because it's so warm out, and you're making a visual change. Anytime you go through something like this, when it's all foliaged out, and then you make a very obvious visual change because you're going through and taking all that visual away, that's something mature bucks in pressured areas notice. So doing it this time of year, all these runways will become habit again. Won't be a big deal. So doing this postseason, it's a big deal in a pressured area, as opposed to doing it during preseason and changing the visual and leaving a lot of human odor. Typically, when you're looking at mature buck activity on a state like Michigan, PA, Virginia, you do anything preseason after the deer have been left alone for 6 months. Typically hasn't been any human activity in the woods whatsoever. And you go in preseason and you make visual changes to leave a lot of human odor. The mature bucks that are 3 and 4 years old that have been shot at or actually carry old wounds, they know what that means. They know what that influx of human activity means. And what they do is they change their routines. You may think you're only scouting and you're not trying to hurt anything. They don't know that. They look at your human invasion as being a threat to their existence. So what they do, the mature bucks, they take on nocturnal habits. So doing it this time of year, it doesn't really make any difference. This is the time of year to do that. So we're going to clean up this. No sense getting it on video, but there's probably 7 or 8 different sub routes that are going through these briars. You know, this one here is connecting this open timber to this bedding area and this overgrown weed field right here, CPR field. So the more lanes you open up while still leaving a lot of this heavy security cover bordering those lanes, the more apt you're going to get mature buck activity through here. And the very first year I did this and opened these runways up, basically made these runways, they didn't exist before. It was an immediate thing. You know, I did it that first postseason, and that fall there was a lot of deer traffic on these routes. Obviously in Michigan there's not a lot of mature bucks, so while I seen a lot of deer, I didn't have an opportunity to shoot anything because I never saw anything big enough. And that's just because I'm in central Michigan where it's all sandy soil, and it takes a deer usually 3 or 4 years old to grow a rack worthy of me taking a shot at it. And just not a lot of deer in this area survived to 3 or 4 years old. Okay, my grandson John is filming this swamp, marshy area. There used to be a lot of elms in there, and they all died and tipped over, and now that's just tall weeds. Those were over my head in the fall. And so this is a nice transition zone. Turns into a little pinch point right here. There's a river behind me when you see me. And then all this red brush. There's this big patch of red brush here. It's probably 50 yards wide, 40 to 50 yards wide. And I made some lanes with a Stihl, S-T-I-H-L. I bought one of those, it looks like a weed whip, but instead it's got a 7-inch saw blade on it. And I got one for brush, and I've cut, again, this was solid red brush. I cut lanes through here 2 years ago, and you can see, 2 or 3 years ago, and you can see where the deer are using these. So instead of having the deer skirt the outside edges of this red brush, I've actually created a nice secure zone where they can actually come right through this red brush and feel more secure, because they got that heavy cover to the sides, and this is all thick and nasty and green in the fall. And they're obviously have started using it. None of this was here until I created this myself. And I picked out my tree first. And when I picked out the tree, that's when I decided where I was going to put the lanes for the deer to travel through this red brush from whichever direction they're coming. So we're going to follow this main path that goes through the length of the red brush. And I made some fingers shooting off in different directions so deer coming from other directions can shoot through this red brush, because there's a crop field over that ways away, and there's a crop field over this ways away. And this is kind of a small pinch point, but I wanted the deer to come through here so I would have nice shot opportunities from the tree that I chose, which I am going to get in. So this is going to need, this year it won't need any grooming. These lanes are still plenty open, but there's a lot of little red brush shoots starting to grow off to the sides, and those will, not this year, maybe not even next year, but those will need to be re-groomed. This main lane won't. It's going to be open for a few years, but some of these smaller little shoots, like this one right here, come on up here. This lane right here, that will, you can see the new stuff growing up in there. It doesn't take long in this red pricker briar brush for this stuff to grow. That'll be okay this year. They can still slide through there, no problem. And basically that will go right by my tree. And then as we keep going down this main one, they can come down this main chute, and they can turn on this one here that I created, this runway here, and that goes out, that goes out to a crop field over there, and then keep coming. So anything when it's in here, that it has to come down this main trail, and that's more swamp in front of us. So here's another little offshoot, and as you can see, I think it was 3 years ago I prepped this. You can see where this stuff's starting to grow up. It's still going to be fine for a deer to slide through that this year, but another year, probably next year, I'll have to clean these little side runways up a little bit. But that goes out into that marshy area. Then the main trail continues. And then right here, it continues off into that swamp. If you want to pan up ahead, there's a river over there. That's partially wet in the fall. That's really tall marsh grass, some cattails back in there. So this runway goes into there, so deer can come out of there, take this main run, go into that other swamp. It's just a nice little connector between the two. Or deer that are coming from that crop field, if that's in standing corn, I made this little offshoot right here through this red brush. This was all red brush here. So they can come down through this and continue and come right off over into this runway, going up towards, there's a hay field way up there. So there's lots of different little offshoots here. And a deer coming from this way, you can follow me. And then here was another little offshoot. So this here is a different area of the swamp. This one's a little bit different. The river's right over there, about 150 yards. It's a relatively shallow river they can cross pretty easy. So that's cattails and tall marsh grasses. This one here is just marsh grass. But again, there's a little offshoot that goes down into that. You can see where it drops down. And then the tree is right over there where you see the saw. And I'm going to get up in that tree, and I'm going to have John, my grandson John, film me while I'm up there in my saddle. So we're going to do that next. And I brought my extension saw. It's up against a tree, but I don't really think we're going to need it for anything here. This is just a check to see if this location needed any pruning, but it doesn't look like it's going to, but won't know until I get up in the tree. And as you can tell, this is on private property because I have spikes in the tree. Again, this is another piece of property that I haven't shot a buck. I haven't seen a buck I would shoot in Michigan in 3 seasons. That's hunting all season. I'll see 10 to 18 Pope and Youngs when I go to Kansas or Iowa in a week. And I haven't seen one here in 3 years. The year prior to that, I killed one, and the year prior to that, I killed 2. But they just don't exist here that often. So it's very difficult to kill them in a pressured state. We got lots and lots of deer, but so many people shoot deer when they're 2.5 or even 1.5 years old, and it takes 3 or 4 years before they get to be P&Y. And I've shot bucks 5 years old up here that weren't P&Y. They were 110 inches. So it's just difficult in pressured states with sandy soil, which Michigan is. So anyway, I'm up in this tree at this location. 3 years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, this is all briar patches around me for probably 50 yards that direction, 30 yards that direction, 50, 60 yards in that direction, and about 30 yards in that direction. And this tree is the biggest tree here. So this is the tree I wanted to hunt. And obviously when all this stuff was briars, the deer were not traveling through here whatsoever. They were skirting the outside edge because it was too thick to go through. So what I did, as I mentioned, I bought a Stihl trimmer with a saw blade on it, 7.25 inch saw blade. And I went and I cleared one main lane going from that swamp to that swamp over there. This is a little tiny pinch point. So I cleared something from that swamp to this swamp over here, a main shot through there, which I showed you on camera. And then I made little offshoots. So deer coming from other directions in this swamp, because the swamp goes that way a little distance too, I made little offshoots off the main trail through the briars so deer would have little passageways. And everything I did, all these little runs that I created by cutting them down to the ground, they're using the hell out of them now. I haven't seen a shooter buck here since I did it, but the deer are using it, and I see deer here every time I hunt here. But the point is, they are using those paths now because now it's a shorter distance as opposed to going around and skirting the outside perimeter of this red brush briars. So it's also the path of least resistance because I cleaned them up pretty good. I'm going to have to redo them probably in about 2 years, but the one time I did it, it's lasted, this is going to be the 3rd year and they're still fine. So I'm going to have my grandson John, who's on the camera, I'm going to have him go to walk these different runways, and I will show you all of my different shot opportunities. And let's say I wanted to kill John right where he's at, I would have two options. I would either come around here and take that shot like that. Oh, I also forgot to tell you, I usually separate these panels a little bit, about like that. So I would either take that shot, or another option, because he's on a runway. John is actually on a runway, so if he came in from that direction, I know without question, unless he turned around and left the same exact route, he's going to walk that path and go by me and give me a broadside shot. Because if he's where he's at now, it's going to be a straightaway shot or a facing the tree shot, which I probably won't take. So he's going to continue this route, and he's going to go right by here, which is going to give me this shot basically right here, just off to the side. So I've got the tree. I'm using the tree as a buffer. I'm going to swing around the tree as he's coming. My bow's going to be hanging right over here to my left. I'm going to pick the bow up, use the tree as a buffer, and then as soon as he hits this spot, either right there or right here, as he's walking, I'll tell you where I'd shoot him. I would take that shot right there, because from that position, he's going to be slightly quartering away, which is a shot I prefer, especially on this steep of an angle. I'd rather have him be quartering away, so I'm going through more vitals as opposed to dead broadside. So that would be the shot I would take there. Now, if I had wanted to shoot him over there without having to spin around like all these weird guys do on platforms, they spin 180 degrees around on their platform, which is the easiest way to get picked I know of. What I would have done if I wanted to shoot him over there was just spin around the tree this way, and I'd take that shot right there. That way I'm still using the tree as a blocker. Saddle hunting is all about kill opportunities and not getting picked. And that's what tree trunks are for saddle hunting. Saddles are designed to use this as a blocker. Otherwise, you might as well be on a regular tree stand platform. If you're going to just hunt on a platform and not have steps around the back of the tree where you can move around the tree and use the tree as a buffer and always shoot to your strong side, you might as well hunt on a platform, because otherwise you don't get any more shot opportunities. If you have to sit on a platform and hunt from a platform with nothing to move around the tree on, I can't see the big advantage of using a platform. Also, if you're just going to hunt from the front edge of a platform, your body's going to be way away from the tree, as opposed to if you were on a tree stand. At least on a platform in the tree stand, your body's going to be up against the tree. So you're going to have less chance of getting picked, a little less. It's still likely you're going to get picked in a pressured area, but the farther away from the tree your body is, and the more movements you make on the same side of the tree as the deer, the more apt you are to get picked, and that hunt's over. I don't care if it's a doe prior to something you want to kill or whatever. If you get picked, typically that hunt's over, because they'll blow and snort and blah, blah, blah. So he's on the runway. That's the shot I would take to that spot right there. Now that's the shot I would take right there. Now, when I'm sitting, I've got this saddle set up where I'm hanging like this. This is where I'm going to be hanging while I'm hunting. I'm going to be sitting here just like this. So to take that shot there, I'm going to have a bow hook here. This is where my bow is going to be hanging. I also have a bow hanger over here on the back side. So if I want to shoot over into this area, I'll move my bow and then move my body over, so my bow is out of the way and I'm not having to hold on to it. But for that shot opportunity right there, I'm going to move my foot over here. I'll have my bow in my hand and take that shot. Now continue on to that run. Now that's a runway. Deer could come up out of the swamp that way, and when they do, they're walking right through this open area where he's standing, where the cameraman is standing. Okay, you can pan back. So if a deer comes up out of that runway, and they have several times, just nothing I would shoot, they usually come across this little opening. There is usually a scrape under this beech tree. So they'll come across that little opening, which I've got a wide open shot right through there, and I don't even have to move for that shot. Okay, and you're gonna see a runway that's coming. You see it? Yeah, that one. Okay, keep walking that. It goes right down the edge of that branch. I put that branch there for a reason, to keep them on that side right there. I'd take that shot, pan up to me, That's a relatively straight down shot. Right there, he'd be dead broadside. I would probably wait until he went another 7 or 8 yards farther on that same run, and then I'd have a quartering away shot. But either way, I've got that shot opportunity. And then also for that shot where he was standing in that opening, that's again, pick up the bow, it's right there. And then I'm not gonna have you move around anymore. Can you see me okay up here with that sunlight? Okay. So then if something was coming across over here a little farther out where it was too far to shoot, but it's gonna come back over here within range on where I've got this runway cut through the briars over here, I'm gonna slide over here and I'll have that shot opportunity right there. So in this tree, I can move around this tree any direction. I've got to take some of this rough bark out of here this year yet, but anyway, I can move around this tree in any direction very easily just by moving around on my steps. You can't do that with a platform. Platforms are nice if you're in a tiny little tree where you can shoot all the way around it, but when you're in a tree like this, you're gonna have dead spots if you don't have steps around the back side of the tree. Also, to me, what's more important than that is you're not being able to use the tree as a buffer, because in the fall, when the foliage is down and the pre-ruts here, it's easy to get picked because you don't have any background. You don't have any leaves behind you to give you any background cover. So it's very important to be able to very easily move around the tree quietly. I mean, obviously I'm going pretty fast, but if I were hunting, that would all be smaller, slower movements. Something else I want you to notice is obviously I'm using screw-ins here and spikes in the tree. The farmer let me. I've got these steps up above my ring. So I've got a ring where I can move around this tree really easily. They're gapped probably 8 to 9 inches apart. So it's real easy movements. But a lot of times when you're in a bigger tree like this, and I hunt trees a lot bigger than this, but this is a decent sized tree. Once you get up to your ring, it's hard to lift your body up above your ring. You got to basically grab onto the tree and have it, you know, you've got your lineman rope on, but still it's a little more difficult to get up above your ring. So as long as you continue with your same step pattern that you had below your ring, just continue up with either a folding step, a double fold, or this one here is a butterfly step, T-step. Put one there, and one there, just like you're continuing to climb. That way it's easy to lift your weight up and pull up above and get on the steps. And then you can, you know, hook up with your tree tether. This just makes it a lot easier to go up and down above your ring. Also, if you notice, I've got a bow holder here, got a bow holder here, I've got a bow holder over here. So I've got 3 bow holders. And I also have a bent up bow holder right here. That's where my backpack goes. And the reason I put that over there about 120 degrees from how I'm sitting is if I want to move over here, even over into here, that backpack is still off my shoulder enough where it's not getting in my way for any shot opportunities. Yet, while I'm hunting, I'm on these steps, I can easily, it's right here, I can easily grab anything out of that. And I also use a fleece, a very flimsy fleece backpack, so that as I take my layer garments out and change my clothes or whatever, as I take stuff out, the backpack kind of just falls down into a slim little line of fabric. You know, most of these backpacks nowadays, they have a frame to them. You know, they're made out of fabric that it holds its position, if I guess that's the best way of putting it. So once you take stuff out of it, it still has the same bulk. It still has the same shape to it. Mine, as soon as you take stuff out, it just collapses against the tree, so it's not sticking out very far. But by having it there, it's out of my way, very easy to get into. It's hanging right here. It's not in my way for moving around the tree over here. So, you know, it's still hanging over here. So I got a bow holder here, bow holder here, bow holder here. This is the one my bow is going to be on when I'm physically hunting. If I need to take a shot over in here, I'll slide over here. I'll lift my bow up off this hook. If I see that shot's going to happen, I'll put it on this bow holder here. So now my bow is not on the opposite side of the tree. It's still right here off my left shoulder, and I'm right-handed. So I'll just, when the shot comes, I'll just reach over here, grab my bow, and take that shot or whatever I need to do. And again, if I'm sitting here like this in my hunting position, my bow is going to be on this hook here. If I'm going to shoot someplace over in there or over in there, because I'm going to move around the tree to my left, I'll pick the bow up, I'll put it on the hook on the back side of the tree, then I'll move my body over. So now my body is over here. I'm not holding onto the bow, but my bow's there ready where I just lift it off this hook and take whatever shot I need over here. So everything has a reason. I don't typically use additional steps above my ring on small diameter trees. On big diameter trees, it helps you get up above your ring. I obviously have mine hooked up a little bit different. I do both ways on public land, which I haven't shown a lot of getting in trees on public land because there's not really much you can do. You just climb a tree and, you know, hook up. But I'll do a couple of those. But on private land, I hook up a little bit different than wrapping my tree tether around the tree. It's a little bit faster, but I do it both ways. You know, this tree tether here it's full length, so I can wrap it around the tree and hook it up the conventional way. And I always use a girth hitch when I do that, so it doesn't slide down the tree. You usually don't have to worry about it on a rough bark tree because it kind of holds it in place, but on a smooth bark tree, having a girth hitch or something that holds that knot secure and in place so it won't slide down is probably a good idea. But that's about it for this tree. I love this spot. It's a phenomenal location. If this location were if this was in Ohio or Illinois or Iowa or Kansas or Missouri, a spot like this with this type of heavy security cover and these briars and red brush with this much swamp and this being a pinch point, I'd kill a buck here probably every 2 sits. I can't imagine I would not sit in a spot like this and not kill a buck at least every other sit of the year. I'd kill a buck at least on my second hunt, first or second hunt. It's that good of a spot. I always have seen bucks here. Just there's not a lot of bucks to kill here. That's all there is to it. Once in a while there is, and when there is, I try to take advantage of it, and most of the time there's not. Hope there is this year. Earlier, when I decided to do these YouTube videos, I went and spent a lot of money on whiteboards, so I might as well use them. I feel like Karl Rove. But I didn't buy a pointer stick because I could use a branch for that. So anyway, that location that we just messed with at that big black cherry where I cut down that beech tree, basically this is the lay of that. So you got a lot of wet marsh up here. That's underwater pretty much all the time. And then you got just timber with tall weeds. The weeds weren't that tall about 10 years ago, but a bunch of elms were in there and they all tipped over, and now it's really dense, tall weeds. And then back behind that, you've got open hardwoods and then a big crop field. And we walked through this short weed field. These weeds are not tall enough for deer to bed in the fall. So they're pretty short. And then the river's over here. This is all bedding over here, just thick red brush and some scattered trees. And if you remember, I said that river was really shallow. You can walk across it, even though it's like 15 yards wide. And there's a marsh up here up front, and then this is all bedding back here. So deer can come out of this bedding. There's a couple houses here, so deer basically don't go this direction. This is north. So deer can cross the river, go through this bedding area, and right there are those briars that we trimmed up. So those are all just really thick, relatively tall briars. So deer coming from here over to here to scent check for does during the rut, or vice versa, deer going from here to there to scent check. If this field here ever becomes standing corn, that would be another perk of this tree, because deer would go from this crop field to this crop field. But anyway, right here on that point, because this weed field goes back into a corner basically, and then my black cherry trees are right there, that X, and then all that red stuff is red brush. And if you can see those little lines, that's where I took my cutter I bought a Stihl, basically it's a weed whip, but I put a saw blade on it. And I cut through those briars, so I got a runway for deer coming through this bedding area to go through the briars, or from down here through the briars, or from here to come through the briars. And basically everything that goes through those briars is within probably a 15-yard shot. I also have I cleared out a route through that red brush for deer coming from this crop field, if that's in standing corn, coming up in here to this bedding area. So deer can come down this lane that I cleared and cut over into here, or come down this and come over into this bedding area. So basically it's a corner, a lot of activity, and before I cleaned out all those routes, all the deer would skirt around the back side of this red brush. They wouldn't go through it, it was just too dense. And that's the only huntable tree that was in there. So I prepped that tree, and then I made routes so the deer had to kind of go through that. If they wanted to go through that red brush, they had to go on those routes I made, which made it a lot easier. And it also shortened their distance. Obviously, to go from here to here, the shortest route is right through that point, and I cut routes to make that happen. So if you see something and you can create some form of a runway to make it easier for a mature buck to go from point A to point B while he is still in security cover, because that's awesome security cover, all those briars, definitely do that. Just don't go in the woods and look for a location and there's 2 runways and you set up on it. You know, try and create things and be a little more creative and make stuff happen. And you can do that on private land. Obviously on public land you can't do that, but on private land you can. Thanks for watching another episode of Eberhart Outdoors, and please like and subscribe.